Resilience is an interesting word. I've resisted it an awful lot over the course of my career. Just take a moment to consider for yourself, what does it mean for you? And I'm very interested to know how many of you, I'm going to ask for another show of hands, how many of you, when you hear the word resilience, have associations with things like manning up, toughening up, suck it up, grow a pair? A show of hands, if that's the zeitgeist in your organisation, yeah. Or if you have some associations. You're younger than the decision makers of today's corporate life, and hopefully that means the lower number of hands is an indicator that we are moving forward. Because for me, resilience is almost the opposite of all of those things. How do we become tough? How do we become resilient? How do we future-proof ourselves? It's not through sucking it up and not complaining. It's through better connection, taking great care of ourselves, compassion, kindness, and empathy. And that starts with self-compassion. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. There's not going to be any growing a pair here. While we're on that expression, just one word about testicles. How did testicles come to represent strength when, I think it's fair to say, they're pretty fragile? If we want to have a physical metaphor for an organ of the human body that represents resilience and toughness, I've got an alternative, and one day I'm going to be brave enough to suggest this in a board meeting when I hear somebody talk about you should grow a pair. You haven't got the balls. I want to suggest that anyone in the room who's ever given birth? We know about resilience in our private parts. That's all I'm saying. Okay, let's not derail us. Right, before we go on, I just want to be really clear about confidentiality. There is absolutely no pressure on anyone here to reveal anything personal about themselves during my session, nor during the whole of the day, in fact. And we're talking about vulnerability and learning to be really honest with ourselves, so it will be enormously beneficial to you if you can use the safe space that you're in today with all these other lovely people to start to practice being more open and talking about what's really happening for you. So hopefully you will automatically have a partner in this room. Is there anyone are there any tables which don't have an even number? Because there might be a bit of shifting around. You might want to, yeah, it would be an advantage to you. Hands up if you're not in an even number so that everyone else can see. Okay, right, there's a lot of you. You might want to think about who is going to be your buddy for this session. Ideally, I want you to partner up with just one other person. It's not the end of the world if you go into threes, but you'll get more out of it if you are in twos for the exercise I'm going to suggest. So you might want to just look around the room and work out if you're going to move tables for this part of the exercise and find a buddy in the room who you want to share some stuff with. What goes with that is absolutely critical pledge about confidentiality. Whatever you share, you need to know is going to be safely contained within the confines of that private conversation. So can we have a show of hands from absolutely everyone in the room that we will honour confidentiality today? Anything that you decide to share with your buddy, anything you decide to share with the whole room, that's just strictly for these walls only. Thank you. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. I'm going to distill 15 years' worth of experience of working to help people become more resilient to ensure that you walk out of here today with an idea of something you can do to build your resilience, to future-proof yourself at a very personal level. So even if you already feel pretty strong, pretty on top of things, pretty resilient, there's always room for more, right? There's always room for more future-proofing. So there'll be one thing you're going to get out of this session, and that is the one small change. You're going to identify a practical, tiny step that will support your development and your self-care. In order to get there, I'm going to provoke your thinking about, one, how honest with yourself are you already? And I'm going to give you a quick aide-memoire, which is a good place to go whenever you feel pressure or stress or lack of resilience happening to you. It's just 5 simple steps you can take to take care of yourself. Sound good? Great. The first thing I want to go to is the power of honesty with ourselves. I've always considered myself to be someone who's really good at talking about my own mess or my own pain or my own difficulties. But what I've come to realize lately is I'm really good at it afterwards. I can say, oh yeah, I was so stressed last month. I don't know how I did that to myself. Or I can talk about the fact that when my husband was made redundant in December 17, it was like the rug being taken out from under my feet. It's much harder to talk about how it's impacting me right this second. There's a big be strong driver in me that wants me to project perfection to the world. I've got it all handled. I know what I'm doing. And we all do that, and we all compare our messy insides with other people's perfect projection, and we assume that all those people over there have got it all sorted out, and I'm the only one. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're not the only one. And the joy of starting to share and disclose an allyship that we're going to be talking about today is that you learn that you're not the only one, that everything you're experiencing is part of the beauty of being human. We don't want to work with machines. We want to work with deeply flawed, complex human beings. So this is a couple of tools to allow yourself to be a deeply flawed human being. Let's see how up for this you are. I'm going to talk about the common symptoms of pressure. And let's see to what extent as I'm talking, I'm going to ask you to reflect on how true is this for you. So these are the 3 common symptoms that we hear about when we're working with people in our company who are close to burnout. These are the most common patterns that emerge. And these are typically people, by the way, who don't easily reveal this stuff to their colleagues. They'll have a kind of whole brilliant armor and mask going on. The first symptom is everything to do with the body. If we allow ourselves to listen to our bodies, it has such immense wisdom for us. And typically, what we tend to do is drown out that wisdom with sleep meds, pain meds, a whole range of other kind of medications that we buy in the off-license or elsewhere. The second common symptom of pressure is difficulty concentrating and focus. We live in the age of distraction, don't we? I haven't got my phone in the room with me today, confession. I'm not doing the Twitter thing because I have to control my compulsive need to know what's going on in the world out there, and it doesn't serve me. It makes me anxious if I'm constantly looking at who's WhatsApped me, what's the latest email. In order to be fully present and connected, I need to take quite dramatic steps to move myself away from my devices. So if that's you, just make a note. Are you somebody who is finding when time gets tough, it's hard to concentrate? The third area is like people say, I should be having a great time. I love my work. I've met my career goals. This is what I wanted to be doing. And yet, for some reason, it's just not fun. I'm taking on too much. The strain and the effort and the stress is taking the fun out of it. So this is where I'm going to buddy you up, please. So if you don't have a natural partner in your group, you can maybe move around and just for this session, go and sit with somebody else to find a buddy. And I'm going to ask you, just for 2.5 minutes each, I'm going to be really strict on timekeeping, so I'm going to do a shout for half time when you need to swap over who you're talking about. 2.5 minutes on person 1 and then 2.5 minutes on the other person to just talk between the two of you in a confidential way about to what extent are these symptoms true for you. In times of turbulence, change, pressure, how much of this has been going on for you, say for the last 3 months? To what extent do you identify, and how frequently is this your experience? Go! Okay, thank you. I can feel such such depth and such richness in these conversations, and it's not over. You will get the opportunity to carry on with that rich conversation you've just started. How many of you, as a result of having shared something about yourself, feel better in some way? Feel more connected to everyone in the room, not just the partner you were talking to? Yeah, not everyone. Okay, I get it. There's a chemical change that happens inside our bloodstream when we connect. When we make a genuine connection, we look into someone's eyes and we feel heard and seen. It changes the cortisol level in your blood. It's one of the first things we need to go to when we feel stressed. So more on that in a moment. Another very quick tool I want to give you that will help you to be honest with yourself in the moment, not just after the event, from 1 minute to the next as you're going through your working week. I want you to ask yourself this: what is my stress number? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is lying on a beach with no children, no one making any demands on you whatsoever, and you've got 3 weeks of annual leave ahead of you. Somewhere between 4 and 6 is my happy ground, my middle ground. I don't actually like being too relaxed at work. I don't want to be bored. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I like to have a bit of energy, a bit of excitement, a bit of caffeine going on. So that's my kind of happy middle place, up to about 6. Maybe even a 7 can be a happy place for me. In the extreme contrast, a 10 is a miserable, heart attack-inducing, crying in the toilets. It is not a good look or a good experience. So what I've learned to do with myself over time, I should have said at the beginning, I'm a recovering workaholic myself, and I'm like my own case study, work in progress on managing resilience. And one of my biggest tools is this, that I just keep honest with myself during the course of the day by asking myself, what's the number? And I know that when I go over a 7, I need to do something differently. So here's a tool for doing something differently. It's a very simple aid memoir that hopefully you can pass on very easily to colleagues who are having difficulty with resilience as well. I actually keep a copy of this very close to wherever I'm working to remind myself. The main thing is to remind ourselves to counter the instinct to speed up that goes with change and turbulence and stress. Something chemical happens in our brains when we experience threat, and we're hardwired to be better at perceiving threat than we are at perceiving opportunity. So everything that brilliant Tracy was saying about mindset in change and disruption, it's all about how are we looking at it. And unfortunately, we have to work much harder with our conscious mind to see the opportunity in change than we do to see the threat, because that's how we've evolved. And as that chemical change happens in us, we start to feel threat and our body starts to go into that instinctive mode of survival. All of the cells in our body are gearing up for speed. Incredibly useful if you're about to run a race or swim from a great white. Incredibly unhelpful if you are sitting in a meeting trying to figure out a really complex change program. So here's what you do in that moment. First thing is give yourself permission to stop. The S of stomp is stop. If all you can do is give yourself the moment to go for a bio break, then take it and use that time to breathe deeply, and that will bring oxygen and glucose back to the most important part of your brain, prefrontal cortex, which is the bit that really, really needs help in that moment. If you have got time to go for a walk or completely change scene, that is a massive enabler for your productivity and your clarity for the rest of the day. The T of stomp is take stock. Use that time to be mindful. You're going to be doing a whole session later on mindfulness and well-being, and that's where this comes in. You know, giving yourself the space to just consider, how am I? What's my stress number? And what do I need right now? And training the people around you to ask what you need rather than maybe going straight to problem solving, which isn't always so helpful. The O of STOMP is about organisation. This is a silver bullet, and we nap to productivity and clarity and resilience, and we now know that the science behind this tells us that if you try to carry too much in your brain, then that in itself is a stressor. So having systems for capturing it outside of your brain is in itself very, very helpful for your resilience. Managing the work rather than just doing it speaks to another point that Tracy made so well about reassessing value. Organisations are going to become better in the future as we get much better at challenging. Why are we doing this? How does this fit with our strategic intent? What is our strategic intent? Let's get really clear about that before we all get busy. Finally, the P of STOMP is absolutely critically important during times of change and stress. It speaks to the way we talk to ourselves in those moments. So bear with me, I know that sounds a bit odd, but we all have an inner critic. We all have that little voice, which is actually often well-intended. It's trying to protect us from getting it wrong and mucking up and failing spectacularly in front of everyone. It tends to be very conservative and wanting us to play it safe, play small. And it will do that in a very unsophisticated way by telling us you're not good enough for this. Don't put yourself forward for that promotion. That's embarrassing. Don't show yourself up. Stay small, hide. That voice gets bigger and more powerful the more tired we are, the more stressed we are, and the more confused we are by organisational turbulence. So in those moments, it is critical that you are proactively managing it. And if this is something that's relevant for you, here's a very simple tool for proactively managing it. It's called the 3 wins exercise. At the end of each workday, or it might be the whole day, just before you go to bed, just get into the habit of writing down 3 wins. We're not looking for lives saved. We're not looking for industry awards. A win might be, I managed not to lose my rag with that person. I did not swear. Anything you can identify from the day that you are pleased with, however small, if you write that down, it will change your neural circuitry. It will change the way you think about yourself. And if you're a team leader or you have any influence over the way your team agenda is set, starting every team meeting with a small section on wins this week, wins this month, what have we achieved, look how far we've come, changes the way we all think about our work, which changes our resilience levels. Oh, I didn't mean to be on this one. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one small change. This is where you get to define for yourself how from Monday morning you are going to be more resilient. There's just a few ideas here. Yours will be completely different, maybe. My hypothesis is that you knew before you set eyes on me what you need to do in order to be more resilient. It's just really, really hard to bring good intentions to reality. So here's where you get to do that. Before you leave the building today, you and your buddy are going to be each other's accountability partners on your one small change. This isn't all nicey supportive. This is like, how do you make that measurable? How will I know if you've done it? And when are we going to follow up with each other? Okay? So you are now going to take a moment of silence to consider what is your one small change. It might be that you are going to begin every new day at work with 5 minutes of peace and intention setting before you allow all the screamers to cloud your vision about what you're supposed to be working on. It might be that you consciously change the way you engage with your email or your phone. So take the bloody pinger off, stop allowing it to interrupt you when you're working on something important, or make a decisive move to reduce the number of times you look at email. If you look every 10 minutes, you are creating anxiety for yourself right there. It might be an intention to be more active. Critically, for resilience, it might be an observation that you know you will be more resilient if you have somebody at work that you can be yourself with. It gets so hard as we move up the leadership of an organisation to find people who it's okay and it's still appropriate and professional to be real with. But I want every one of you to have somebody at work who you can say, I'm having a really bad day. I just need to talk about it for 5 minutes. If you haven't got that person, you must find it. Him or her. And maybe it's somebody you meet here because it's really hard to do that in your own workplace, so you might have to be creative about it. And if you're someone who's ever struggled getting to sleep or staying asleep in quality sleep, you need to re-engage the way you use screens in the evening, so it might be that. Or it might be anything else. Take a moment to write it down. Be really, really clear with it. And make sure that you and your buddies do not leave here without some absolute clarity about when you're going to follow up with each other. And I would love to hear from any of you after the event on what your action was and and how well you've brought it to life. So what I hope I've given you today is some clarity about the value of being honest with ourselves in the moment about what we are really experiencing. Stop being so strong, stop putting on the brave face and the armor and being real and saying, I'm scared, I'm hurting, I need help, I need reassurance. The stomp tool and your practical change. I'd love to talk to you more over the breaks. Grab me. I'd love to hear what your change is. Maybe there's somebody really brave in the room who would just like to end with telling us what you are committing to doing from Monday. This will be like the ultimate accountability, because when you see us in the future events, we're going to ask you about it. Go on. Yes, brave woman.
So I've just finished a year of maternity leave, and I go back to work next week, and I'm going to write down 3 wins for the end of each day.
Fantastic. Yes. I'm out of here. Thank you all so much. Joyous to meet you.